That's the kind of controversy that goes on in science.
Well, they probably know that.
Just writing a story, trying to.
I had had enough.
Well, you drove out there into the middle of nowhere and had some sort of loud verbal display challenging ET in general out in the middle of nowhere?
That's what I was doing. I actually had a pistol in my hand at the time. I was really ticked off. When I was having this fit, I was waving the gun in the air, okay, and I had this fit. And at this moment, I said, okay.
He was a Louisiana man named Montaldo. Folks around called him Six Gun Joe. Worked with ICAR, don't you know? Investigating UFOs. Out for a drive with a gal one night, they stopped to check out the reporting site. When an alien lit right there on the ground, he commenced to throwing his weight around. Now, old Six Gun didn't take too kindly to that kind of thing, especially without Vaseline or anything like that, Seriously. Well, Six Gun looked that critter right in the eye and said, "Any last wish before you die?" Yo, reached for his gun, quick as a twitch, and said, "Fill your claw, you son of a bitch." Now a legend spread across the land about this pistol-waving man. But if you're from space or from Earth below, you don't give no lip to Six Gun Joe.
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
It's controversial. Nothing is cut and dried, and when you read things that are published in magazines or newspapers by some breathless journalist who's writing a story trying to excite you about something, you can pretty well figure out that he probably doesn't have it right.
Well, because a lot of it's just what it is. It's for the shock value. It's not.
Journalism,
It's nothing more than that. It's how much. Well, unfortunately, in the States especially, shock value sells.
How many times have you read an article of, the universe is going to end in the Big Crunch, and then the next day you read an article, expert says the universe will expand forever. Well, which one of these experts is right?
Yeah,
That's the kind of controversy that goes on in science.
Well, they're probably both right. We'll probably expand forever, and then one day we'll probably implode on ourselves. They're probably both right. They just haven't figured it out yet. And since I've learned a long time ago, nothing's wasted in the universe. Everything is recycled. So even if we implode, we'll just start over again.
Exactly.
So I've never seen what, and for me, in some science, I have to wonder, because there's some things that I have to wonder about. Like, 2 decades ago, we were all talking about water on Mars. Of course, science said no, no, no. Of course, now we know that's wrong.
Yeah.
That there is. And, we've all been saying there's life on Mars in some sort, form, or fashion. Finally, they're admitting that, yeah, there probably is some type of life on Mars. So it just seems like the mainstream science is always 20 to 30 years behind the visionaries. And it's a shame, because you would think by now they would have learned, the science would learn. Well, a lot of our technologies are based from sci-fi, from science fiction.
Oh, yeah. And much of science today, mainstream science, is no longer true science.
Oh, no. Today it's about
the religion.
It's the religion of science, and how much money can I make it, how much fame can I get.
Yeah, and what gets funded is generally what is popular, and very often you have to understand that science is the tool of governments to control the masses of humanity. And therefore, they don't want science to be free and to reveal all of their secrets. They want to control it. So what gets funded is what they approve, and what doesn't get funded, is what doesn't get done.
Well, I just came back a couple weeks ago. I was at a meeting at Tulane University amongst a group of physicists, and I asked them point blank, how come we don't have any scientists that are in it for the love of science and not in it for the grants or the loans or the fame or the money? And of course, a lot of them got offended, but several of them got up there and addressed the question. Well, it's not what it used to be. You have to do something popular to get a grant or a loan.
Mm-hmm.
Schools won't fund you unless it's something that is popular and mainstream or something that society's interested in. And so there's not a lot of true science anymore in the fact that let me have $1 million so I can go find out why a particular thing works. He said, we just don't see that kind of science anymore.
No.
He said, now
it's very, very bad for humanity.
It is, and it's going to hurt us in the long run because there's no true science. I don't want to offend, because I know there's a lot of scientists listening to my show. I said I don't want to offend anyone because I know a lot of y'all are out there doing hardcore research, but from the ones I've had on the show, I know a lot of them are not doing what their heart wants to do.
Exactly, and they need to be doing what is in their heart to do, what drives them, because that's where the true creativity is, and creativity is the primary moving force of the universe, and it manifests through people and through science.
It's just a strange little beast we live in today. But I did hear a Nobel laureate the other day talking about how peaceful the planet is and how nice the planet is. Well, he's making a point, and he was actually very correct, and he's going to win another award for this. If you take it based on where we are today, based on where we were 50 years ago, or even 100 or 1,000, we're much more peaceful. There are less people dying of starvation or war than ever before on the planet, especially considering there's 6 billion of us today. And he's got a very good point. He said he doesn't understand why humanity is always waiting for the other shoe to drop. He said instead of taking advantage of the most plentiful, most peaceful time the planet's ever existed, most people are sitting at their home whining, crying, moaning, and waiting for the other shoe to drop. He had a good point, and it's a tough one to get around. So he made a joke about this, which was probably in poor taste, but he made a joke, well, maybe the extraterrestrials will come in and wake us up or help us to understand that we're better off than we realize. I just thought.
Well, I'd like to see his statistics.
Yeah. Well, no, it was already looked over by a large group of people. It is a true fact. There is less people starving today than even just 10 years ago. And there's no major wars going on the planet at all. None. There's no World War IIs and no Roman empires or British empires or French empires conquering the world. There's none of that going on. You've got a couple of little brush skirmishes, and that's about it. And so I understood.
You call Iraq a brush skirmish?
Oh, yeah. I call it 53
people?
million dead in World War II, 4,000 dead in Iraq. Yeah, I call it a brush skirmish. It's a big difference. It's not a war. All of our citizens aren't involved in it. We don't have literally millions of troops deployed. To me, that's a war. When we deploy all of our forces and we've got all of our branches out and going, that's a war. What we're doing right now is the same thing we did in Vietnam. We're babysitting and trying to correct someone else's problems. Because let's be honest about it. If the United States wanted to, they could end Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan in one swift blow without even putting any troops on the ground.
Whose problems are we trying to correct?
Not ours.
Well, I mean, we created this problem.
Oh, I agree we created the problem. I won't even argue with you there. I agree that we've created several problems on the planet.
Like the pharmaceutical industry, they create diseases and then they sell you the cure.
Oh, yeah, I heard our emperor the other day said that he's going to give us, at least make some of the more needed medicines free in the United States. I'm like, yeah, well, I'll wait for hell to freeze over, and then maybe we'll see that. Don't get me wrong. If he does it, it would be great. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Why don't they just get a universal health care plan, and they don't have to make the medicines free?
That's true. But you see, they don't even want to talk about that.
But they can sell them for $1.
They don't want to talk about giving everybody in the States. I guess you know what it is. Well, I don't think they want us to live that long. I think they're already worried that there's too many of us, and we can't afford what we have in the country as it is.
Well, there is too many of us, but I don't think their solution is the right one. Education is the right one.
And I don't think going around killing people for the sake of killing people is going to help anything, because basically that's what we're doing in Iraq. I mean, there's no real threat to us over there, or in Afghanistan. There might have been, but there's not now. And frankly,
they've got oil.
They got oil, and we need to keep our oil supply running. And
it could be a trigger for a world war.
Yeah, well, the Bible says that's where the Third World War starts. Is in they didn't call it the Third World War, but that's where they say Armageddon starts. Is in the Middle East, and it's a good chance now that Iran's, launching missiles over there right now, so we might see something. But see, I worry when we have presidents like Obama in office because he's kind of wishy-washy. And he's not a very strong president, so you tend to see more stuff flare up around the world when the United States has weak presidents in office, like when Jimmy Carter was in office.
No, I don't think there's been a truly freely elected president since John Kennedy.
Oh, actually, they say since Truman Roosevelt. They say he was the last president that was elected by the people for the people.
That's probably true.
Yeah, because Kennedy was a give-in, and I think they realized when they did that, just like they did with Obama, they made a mistake. But sometimes
I don't know. Obama's playing their game.
He is now. They matter of fact, Richard Dolan a couple of weeks ago was on my show, and he called him Bush Light. And by the way, I love that.
Oh, he's absolutely right. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I love that term. I've been using it ever since. I had to tell Rich Staines because it's a good term. And
but you know what? He may turn out to be worse than Bush.
You might be right. There's some stuff that he's doing right now that, it was bad because day before yesterday, he was on talking about Guantanamo Bay and releasing the prisoners in the United States. Of course, Congress shot that down. They told him he was losing his mind. But what was really bad is he did this hour and 20-minute lecture, tried to run it over so the networks wouldn't pick up Cheney. Cheney came on, did a beautiful lecture, made Obama look like a total idiot, and has gone up 15 points in the polls because of this. He was at 26, now he's at like 42. And it hurt Obama bad. He sounded like a spoiled kid that couldn't get his way. That's what Obama sounded like.
Oh, boy.
And, I don't know what we're going to do. We haven't had a president like this since Carter. I mean, he thinks because he's the president, everything should be his way. I guess he don't understand what bipartisanship is. But it's like John Podesta when he was talking about, the U.S. should release its documents. And Stephen Bassett's telling me about, Obama's going to be the one that gets the information out. I had to tell him, I don't know. I said, I don't think he can. I don't think he has the strength or the backing to make this disclose anything to the general population. I know in Europe they've been talking a lot and they've been releasing a lot of information, but nothing of any consequence, nothing that's changing anything. France put out some information a few years ago. England put out some. A couple other countries did. And I said this 10 years ago. I said it doesn't matter what countries put out data until the President of the United States or the President of the UN steps up and says extraterrestrials are real, it's not going to matter. Then they're not going to believe anybody else. It's just not. Nobody else has the credibility.
Well, look at all that has come out from very respectable sources and how those sources were then defamed, blamed, destroyed.
Tore down to nothing. Yeah, that's typical.
So it's.
So what made you brave enough to get out and decide to get into this alternative world, as I like to call it?
Well, it kind of snuck up on me because I keep telling people that of all the people who never wanted to know anything about UFOs or so-called aliens, I deserve a place at the head of the line, and that's true. This is not something I ever wanted to know anything about or ever cared about, or I spent most of my life dabbling in the paranormal, metaphysics, studying, reading, working as a hypnotherapist, and my range of expertise was things like past life regressions and relaxation therapy and guided imagery and all that sorts of airy type things. And you could just I didn't believe in it necessarily. I just knew that the therapy worked and that people liked it and they came for it and it was interesting and curiosity to me. And the idea of ever encountering anything having to do with aliens was the furthest thing from my mind. And somebody I wrote a book about so-called biblical prophecy at one point, and somebody read it and they said, well, you didn't say anything about UFOs in here. And I said, well, sure I did. There's a sentence in there, talking, contemptuously about the alien rapture theory, which is what I called it. And that was the extent of what I said, one sentence. And the person was appalled, and it was really strange because not too long after this was when, and this is where the high strangeness factor comes in. No sooner do you have the conversation, then things start happening. And that was not too long after that I saw the UFO with my children, and that's when I started trying to find out what the heck was that I saw, because what I saw, just simply, there was no explanation for it in normal aeronautical terms, just none. And I have a cousin who's an aerospace engineer, works at NASA, and I have people in my family who are engineers and so forth. So everybody said, what you're describing could not have happened. And I tried to get confirmation from other people that they could explain this thing for me, and nobody could explain it. And in fact, people started to say I was losing my mind. Well, I wasn't losing my mind, because I saw it, and so did other people that I knew, and so did my children. We all were describing the same thing. Well, not too long after that was when my first abductee contacted me for a hypnotherapy session. And since I did not believe in this phenomenon, I was determined to prove that it was some other kind of experience. I did a lot of leading, which I don't normally do, just to try to lead the person into describing something else, like an early childhood memory, or maybe a disguised past life memory, or maybe there was some abuse in early childhood, something like this. I was deliberately trying to make it go the other way, and it didn't work. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, this is crazy. I'm reading these articles where these people say that, it's all suggestion on the part of the hypnotist, when somebody comes up with an abduction scenario. And this is clearly not what has happened here, because I know what I'm doing here, and I was not, suggesting to this person that they had an alien abduction experience. I was doing the exact opposite. And one thing led to another, and it got wilder, and I started reading about it because I was extremely curious. I read everything I could get my hands on, was reading 18 hours a day sometimes until my eyes bled. And there was just so much stuff, and there was so much noise, and so many different opinions, and so many investigators, and so little science, and it just got crazy. And I couldn't get any hard and fast answers from anybody about anything. Nobody had a really good theory that covered all of the data, because everybody had different sets of data. And it made me crazy. And since I couldn't find any answers, I started thinking, well, I've read about all of these people, who did this channeling. And of course, that was another thing, because if you start considering, say, a UFO or alien hypothesis, what does that do to the paranormal? I mean, people have been studying and talking and reading and writing and experimenting with paranormal topics for, well over a century. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just hit the phone button. Go ahead.
And none of them are ever talking about aliens. How do aliens fit into that picture? Because if there's such a thing as aliens and UFOs, that changes everything. I mean, everything I thought that I had settled, I had organized in all of my little categories, it was all out the window. And this was very distressing to me. So having made a really long study for years of so-called channeling and experimental communications with other realms of experience, I said, well, if there's any way to get an answer, about any of this, or any possible clue, that might be the way to do it. You couldn't necessarily rely on anything you got 100%, because there's always a noise signal ratio. But I decided to try it, but I knew that I had to do it in a way and under circumstances that are a little more rigorous than, just somebody sitting down and putting on a pyramid on their head and saying, okay, talk to me. And I started this, what I called, a critical channeling experiment, which, is in a fully conscious state using a board-type instrument, and with other people present, participating. It's not just a one-person thing. And using a kind of a vigorous feedback algorithm, to check and cross-check everything that came through, minute by minute, hour by hour, whatever, session by session, and went through this like 2 years, once or twice a week for 2 years, until finally a signal came through that seemed to be, very intelligent, very internally consistent, and it gave some information that actually began to make some sense out of things. And of course, there were some testable things that came through, but there were many things that were not testable. But that's, what you have to, when you're looking for information about something you know nothing about, that's going to be the way it is. You're going to have to hold some things in a questionable category. so that was what happened, and we started recording all of this information over this period of time, and it was delivered letter by letter, and usually nobody knew what was being said until after it was read back. You had to put your word breaks in because all the letters are delivered all in one continuous stream without breaks. So you have to go in and you have to make the word breaks yourself and, figure out what's being said. So that was, and the source identified itself and said, we are you in the future. This is not an extraterrestrial source. I mean, forget it. It's we are you in the future. So basically I'm talking to myself in the future. In a sense, if there is no time, and if I am in contact with some part of my mind that's in another dimension where there is no time, it makes perfect sense. You make contact with your own self, your own brain that can look back on the past and give you answers of what it knows because it experienced it as time flowed by, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So that was basically what happened, and it gave, and my main concern was to ask questions about this so-called alien reality. So I asked quite a series of questions about that. But then I got, once I had a certain number of questions along that line answered, I thought, well, wait a minute, what have I got here? I've got something, I've got this source that's answering these questions. Now, there are all these other questions that I have about history and about conspiracies and about who did what, when, where, how, and why, and what does this mean, and how does that work? So why don't I just ask all the questions that I've always had, that I always wondered, what the answer was, and never had an answer. Nobody else knows either. So let me just get them all in here while I'm at it. So that's what I did.
You might as well ask. Hey, never hurts to ask. I tell people all the time, I ask all kinds of questions because it never hurts to ask.
I mean, it was like having a new toy.
We do massive amounts of case studies. And, I'm very fortunate. I head up an organization with 15,000 members and directors all over the planet, all over the country. We've actually investigated. We have criteria for all of this stuff now. But what we do is,
well, you see, I read those kinds of cases. I read cases.
No, not like this. We haven't even, and most of this stuff, because abduction criteria is closely guarded by the organization, we don't release this information. And the reason why is we would never know who was lying and telling the truth.
Exactly.
And it's the reason we do it. But as of to date, we have 12,500 cases on file. We've actually been through more than about 47,000 people to get there. And some of them turn out to be like what you were talking earlier. A lot of times we can recover memories and stuff without using regression. Sometimes we have to, sometimes we don't. There's other methods we use as well. But you'd be surprised how many times a supposed contact or alien abduction turns out to be some type of childhood problem. Anywhere from being abused sexually or being abused physically to several other things. I have no idea why they turn this in to an alien abduction or an alien contact or an alien visitation, but they do. And, it's a shame, but all we do is refer them to psychologists because there's nothing we can do for them.
Of course.
It's not what we do. And basically, but what we've done, along with Yvonne Smith and Mary Rodwell and Darrell Sims and a few others, Katarina Wilson and about half a dozen others, is we're actually at about an 84% agreeal. This is a first in ufology. On all the data that we've all gathered together, which is a lot, we're on about an 84% agreeal, which has never happened in this field before. And it's major news. It's all over the place because you just don't see that many ufologists ever agreeing on data. But the problem is, in this type of research, if it's truly what it is, then it can only go certain ways. If it's something else, then it's something else, and it won't fall into those categories. And what makes this real sticky, and we tell this to people all the time, people here speak, they assume that we're saying that the 3 or 4 or 5 types of aliens we investigate is the only thing visiting the planet. And I tell them, I said, this is what we do. This does not limit anything else that may be going on the planet or anything else, contacts coming from other dimensions or across other places. I said, those are separate from what we do. And there's other people like yourself, there's other people investigating those things. And we have to investigate everything because there's no way, if you don't, there's no way of ever knowing what's true and what's not. And that's one of the biggest problems in this field is there's a lot of
noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. That's a very good way of putting it, Laura. There's There's a lot of noise.
Well, that was why I stopped doing it. I mean, you have the book. I put the book together because
Mhm.
people wanted me to put the book together. They wanted to hear what my experiences had been. They wanted the material, so I put it together. But I don't do that anymore. And the reason I don't do that anymore was because of the noise.
Well, I imagine you caught a ton of flack. I mean,
I got a ton of flack, and all I could see was, fighting and nobody, imposing any rigorous standards on what they were doing. Even if you have to make modifications to your standards because of the field you're working with, they still should be, somewhat rigorous. There should be a method.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you.
And I just completely got out of it. And
it's a shame because that's the reason we formed this organization, because of places like MUFON and all really didn't have anything strict about how to handle contacts or abductions or investigations along these lines. And I got to say, we're very, very strict, and we really are in this for hard data as much as possible. I mean, we do a lot of comparison study work too, because unfortunately, when in this particular subject, a lot of times that's all you can do because there's no physical, tangible evidence. But there is some tangible, physical evidence.
There is some, and I had a case once that had some, and 2 or 3 other so-called UFO researchers heard about it, and they swooped down on this poor woman.
Oh, I bet you they
snatched up that. I mean, I had a private investigator who was going to pass it, to a police lab as crime evidence without any terms like UFOs or abduction or anything like that, so that there would be no prejudice in the examination. And these UFO investigators, so-called, swooped down on it, snatched, told the girl, the poor woman, that, oh, you don't want it to go to a police lab. You'll get into, it's a big conspiracy. They're all out to get you. This is going to cause you a bunch of problems. Da 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 da. Give it to us. Give it to us. We'll. And so what they did is they took it and they shook it out on a shower curtain.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but that just sounds like something that some of these idiots would do.
And I mean, after that happened, and watching how people's minds could, and of course, somebody who has really, really had an experience, and they are traumatized.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're traumatized to a level that's almost impossible to imagine. And, basically, in my opinion, a crime has been committed.
Yes, it's one of the things I say all the time, and I get complained about because I say it.
Well, so if you have a crime, somebody has been taken against their will, and very often they have been supposedly raped.
In some cases, they have been.
Yeah.
I got to say, when I first got involved with this 25 years ago, the first time somebody told me that, I looked down, I'm like, well, you're just stupid. And but after really getting into the field and spending as long as I have been in it, I realized that some of these people were actually telling the truth.
Yeah.
And there was these physical things going on. And actually, there's a lot more than that goes on. But, it was just surprising to me. And it does depend on what alien species we're talking about, too, on some of the things that are happening. Reptilians are famous for having fun with the ladies. So.
Oh, yeah.
And they're actually quite famous. They're not quite as evil as everybody thinks they are, but they're not real nice guys. So.
I think they are more evil than anybody.
Well, a lot of people do, and I do understand that, because there's a lot of things that suggest that they're quite a bit evil, which there are some things in there, but we learned a long time ago, because of the amount of people and witnesses we have, that they're not the most evil by any means that are visiting the planet. The human-type aliens are much, much more vicious than the reptilians are. But I don't want to take anything away from what they're doing either. People get confused, like when they hear us talking. This is just levels of bad is what we're talking about here. We're not saying that either race is really good. And I got a firm rule. I judge everything by its action. So, I have people from time to time that tell me they have a really good experience with the reptilians or the human aliens. But I asked them, did they call you on the phone and say, hey, Jane, can I come pick you up? Can I do this to you? Can I do that? Well, no, they just come and took me. I said, well, they abducted you, which in this country is a crime punishable by death. It's you can't go around kidnapping people. It is a crime. In some states, it is punishable by death, some by mandatory life sentences. And if it was a diplomat or something, it would be an act of war with another country. So I said, I don't understand how y'all can consider this a good experience if they took you against your will. Regardless what happened in the abduction, still they took you against your will. So I've always had this thing about judging them by their actions. And until they start calling them up on the phone and say, hey, Laura, you know what? I want to come take you out to dinner, and I want to tell you why we're here visiting the planet. That is a legitimate contact. You know, if they come take you in the middle of the night or the middle of the day or on your drive to work or while you're sitting having dinner, no, that's not.
No.
That is an abduction.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and it causes a big turmoil in the field because people want to talk about their good contact experiences, which I'm very skeptical about to start off with, but they don't want to discuss that they were abducted when this happened. They want to leave that part out. It's like selective memories, or let's selectively tell the truth here, and that makes me crazy. But yeah,
and I think that a lot of that kind of reaction can be explained if people would read the book by Martha Stout called The Myth of Sanity. It's about dissociation, how when terrible things happen, you know, a channel of your mind will dissociate off.
I think I've got that. I think I've actually heard that on audio tape. See, I'm very funny. I don't have much time for reading now, so any chance I get, I'll find someone to either transcribe a book for me onto an audio file, or if it's already out, because a lot of books are these days, so I can plug it into my CD at work or in my car while I'm driving. Because I got to tell you, I do a lot of research on proxy while I'm on the road, because we do a lot of traveling, and I just, you know, it's just easier for me. Or now, when I do read, sometimes it's like when we're doing other shows, because I own a station. A lot of times when I'm producing other shows, and I'm just, you know, while the show's on, a lot of times I'll sit there and read, or I'll listen to something else, and because I can listen to the shows anytime. They're all on archive, so it's not possible. Oh, Karen said hi, by the way. I forgot to say that. I've seen her in the virtual auditorium a few minutes ago.
Tell Karen hi.
She heard you. And
we hope to see you here soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping they go over to France this year. I'm sure Karen would love to go over to France. We might not get her to come back. She might stay over there, and poor Richard would come back and have to raise the kids all by himself and stuff.
Oh, he likes it too.
Oh, no, I know he would. It's I always see it's quite beautiful over there. I got a lot. Like I said, I got a lot of friends that travel over there. I've got a standing invitation to go spend some time in Italy. I just haven't had the chance to do it, and so I'm planning on doing that hopefully next year sometime. They got we're working with a group over there restoring a church, and the reason I got involved because my last name's Montaldo, and there's a big Providence up there that's Montaldo, and they actually contacted me. And I come to find out, they got a church up there. They're restoring all the artwork. The church about 1,700. About 1,350 years old. And get this, in one of the murals on the wall, there's 2 UFOs. That's when they heard my last name, they contacted, and then when they heard what I did, they were even more fascinated.
Oh, that's amazing. It's a high strangeness, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. That's exactly what it is. It's one of those things that, it's like when you were talking about one thing led to another, to another, to another. I think sometimes people, and I hate to use this word, but I think sometimes people are chosen for certain jobs. I don't know who's choosing. I don't know if it's aliens or some higher order, and I hate to even speculate on that. But I have seen this too many times. I've seen normal, everyday people doing something entirely different in their life, all of a sudden get wrapped up in this. And for no other reason than that they ran into this person, and then this came to their attention, and this, and then that, and then this, and the next thing they knew, they were writing books, or they were so involved in this, they were doing research, and a lot of people,
it drove me crazy.
It does, and a lot of people, and a lot of times it just takes over your life for a while, which there's no normal explanation for this.
No, there isn't, and that's why I became so desperate. And like I said, when I said I was reading 18 hours a day, this went on for like a couple of years, and I became so desperate for answers because there was so much noise and so much BS.
When there's a lot of BS.
And that's why, I said, well, let me try this and see what happens, because I'm obviously, I felt so desperate for answers that here was a lot of information that was really scary. When you thought about it, it was really scary, and it needed an answer. So that was one of the reasons. I was driven by a sense of desperation. But even so, I wasn't going to let my sense of desperation, take possession of my mind and make me believe anything that came down the pike. So we get this set of answers, and for years, this started in 1994. For years, we considered it to be just, it's just an interesting artifact. Oh yes, they say this is going to happen. Isn't that quaint? Well, blah blah blah. New World Order. Control of society. Blah blah blah. Oh, that's just because back in 1994, none of us could conceive of how we could get from there to here. We couldn't conceive of something like 9/11.
Oh yeah.
It was just so. And then they talk about coming ice ages and climate change, and they were talking about this, 14 years ago. And so in that time, back in 2001 is when everything that they were talking about in 1994, at that point it was like, 5, 6 years before, it all started happening. And that's when I started thinking, wait a minute, what have we been doing? Let's look at this again here. Because what they're saying, there are not exact details on every point. There is some noise in that material also, because that's just the way things are. I'm not a perfect receiver, and the conditions are not always perfect. I do the best I can, and so there's some noise. But damn, I mean, it's a marvelously consistent body of material, and it surprises even me.
Well, it does happen. People lock into whatever means it may be, and it differs from person to person. I'm not sure why, but they do start getting consistent information. See, we got lucky because we started comparing people like yourself and others and seeing what each one was finding, and then we found a whole realm of stuff hidden below all of this because we could do a large comparison study, which no one had done before. Until we came along, no one had done a comparison study amongst contactees and or experiences. There's so many names we can use here, but nobody had really done any comparison studies about what this one was saying with that. And we do find what we call a base thing that's going to happen to all contactees. We know certain age groups and certain things are going to go on in these age groups with different types of aliens, because now we've got enough cases.
Do we know that that's going to happen? Because do these same individuals have a track record of having other things that they said actually happen?
Well, it depends.
That's the question.
Yeah, well, see, it depends on the person. Some of these people have actually been quite good in their entire life of knowing what was coming. Well, I'll give you an example like 911. We have an online support group we've had since about 98. And right before, about 2 months before 911, they all started writing in or coming in and saying how antsy they were and how weird feeling they were. No one said anything about the Twin Towers coming down, but everyone had a pending sense of doom. All of them did. And,
well, you see, in our body of material, in the Cassiopean transmission, we actually had, specific information that related to the Twin Towers.
Yeah. They and it's just a strange phenomenon. You just never know what they're going to hit on and what they're not, and it's just strange. It was like something that happened in Iraq. I forgot what it was. We had a group come in about 2 weeks before it happened, and they all wrote it down and documented what it was. And it was damn good. It had something to do with a counterattack by the insurgents, but they were right on the money. But now the thing of it is did someone tell them this? Did they see this in the future? Or how did they actually obtain this information? Is always one of the things I'm curious about, because, if people even have a basic understanding of time travel, they know if you go and come back, you've changed it. So how could it have happened in the first place?
Right.
So it gets real complicated and real sticky there, but still, so you got to wonder about all of that. So where's the data actually coming from? Is this someone sitting outside of our time and space watching what's going on? Somebody can see now, past, present, and future all at the same time. Because that's the only way time travel could work anyways, if everything existed at the same time anyway. It's the only way, really, you could access information both backwards and forward, as if everything existed at the same time.
Well, I think that it's rather like Uspensky's description of the snail traveling across the garden. To the snail, everything that he encounters as he crawls along the ground, and his vision is, of course, very limited. It all happens to him in time. But a bird flying above the snail crawling across the ground can see that where the snail has been still is there.
Yep.
The different directions that the snail can go in the future or in the forward motion are all there. Of course, the snail will only experience one line of experiences depending on which direction he takes. But they're all there, so the bird can see them all, but the snail can't.
Yeah, and that's the multiple dimension theory, where there's one of us in the next couple of billion dimensions.
I think there are many of us who have some part of our inner consciousness, for lack of a better word, that connects with this higher level, where where we have this bird's eye view of the world, and
there's no real way to
mind.
Yeah. Well, there's no real way to explain some of the information that people come up with.
Yeah.
Or some.
And they're connected.
Yeah.
And many people have it. They have these feelings, and it is amazing to see how accurate some so-called psychic predictions, for lack of a better, I
that's
hate the terminology.
Well, that's a good point, Laura, because we have discussed this in many, many times over the last 10 years. The terminology, both in ufology and paranormal, is so out of date for the time that it's there really needs to be new terms.
We need a new language for it.
We do. I agree with you 100%. We really do need a new language, and it's a sad thing because I like the word ufology. I'm not a ufologist. I do abduction research. I don't study UFOs.
Yeah.
So, but yet,
I mean, what's the word paranormal really mean?
Yeah. That's the thing. And that's a broad term when you say paranormal.
And psychic phenomena. I mean, what is it? What is it?
Yeah. What is a psychic phenomenon? I ask that question all the time, but I get chewed out for asking that question.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? What is a psychic phenomenon? I said, well, what is it? I mean, I said, and then of course they'll list like 30 different things. I'm like, well, wait, they can't all be psychic phenomena. I said, we got to pick something here, y'all, and say this is a psychic phenomenon, this is this, and this is this, and they don't want to do that because it limits what can be said and done, and we want to hold them to. I've been told that we're trying to hold them to too strict evidence criteria, but we're not. I just want things to be labeled.
But there's another thing, because there's several groups of scientific researchers that are working in, quote, paranormal.
Paranormal.
And the thing is once they got to the point where it was accepted that they could be scientists and they could study this as a scientific field, they actually became so rigid that what they are doing excludes most of what it is they claim to be studying. They want to spend all their time having these little meters, and people coming in and running trials and looking at cards and so on and so forth, repeatable experiments. That's what they want to do. And it's like I said, you can't have repeatable experience. You can't know, position and momentum at the same time. And they're doing it. And so the so-called paranormal researchers that consider themselves of the scientific ilk have put themselves in ivory towers where they're completely out of touch with the what they're trying to study, what they're trying to understand.
No, that's true, and I've said that myself. It's I don't know exactly when there's this separation started, but it does seem like it's getting worse.
And the difference, the world or the chasm between paranormal, I hate that word, paranormal researchers and people who study the UFO and or abduction phenomena.
Yeah. Well, but you see, that's the thing too, and people get mad when I say this, but there are some correlations between abductees and some
Absolutely.
What we call paranormal events.
I mean, one of the biggest things about the whole UFO/alien abduction phenomena is the so-called high strangeness factor.
Yeah.
And that high strangeness factor is exactly correlated to a whole lot of historical so-called paranormal experience.
Yeah, the two are interchangeable. There seems to be a direct connection, not in everything, mind you, but in a lot.
So how much of the old-timey paranormal stuff was, say, UFO or alien abduction inspired, and or vice versa?
Well, it's like when I mentioned one day, somebody, I had one of our, we have several pastors and stuff that have joined the organization, and I had one of them on the show with me a couple of years ago. And I asked him, I said, I remember hearing the story of Mary when I was a kid growing up, roaming around in the desert and coming back pregnant. I mean, this is classic alien abduction, by the way.
Yeah.
And well, he got offended, and he said, well, what are you saying? Jesus Christ is an alien? I'm saying it is a possibility.
I didn't say it, you did.
That's what I said. I said, I'm just saying, guys. I mean, Ezekiel, that's classic alien abduction. Mary, that's classic alien abduction. And of course, I've been heavily criticized, which I don't mind. I mean, I'm a big
fairy
boy.
Experiences.
And how much of this so-called fairy experiences and a lot of the gremlins and stuff that we're seeing back in the day were not actually extraterrestrial. See, there's no way for us to know because none of us were there, and we need to know because we need to know what would actually be considered paranormal, for lack of a better word.
What about poltergeist phenomena? I mean, poltergeist is one of the oldest recorded phenomena.
And where does that fit in? I mean, it's a tough one.
And apports, disappearing objects and reappearing objects.
Oh, I don't even want to talk about things like that because my keys go. Laura, I got the damnedest luck. Sometimes I will set something down. I mean, set it down like right here in front of the computer where I'm sitting. Get up, go get a coat, come back, it's gone. Then I'm looking all over the house, and then all of a sudden I'll come back and it's sitting right where I left it. I'm like, okay. Now, to me, that's just irritating to start off with. And I don't know what it is.
The cat walked by twice.
You know, my friend tells me the other day, he said, well, maybe your dogs are getting it. I said, I don't think so. But I said, what, they're getting it and bringing it back? They're not that smart, guys. Come on.
And that's one of the reasons I call this book High Strangeness.
That's a good name for it. Well, so far, most of what I've read in the book, I've been all right with. You know, I know I'm always leery about the word channel, and I'm not going to lie to you, but, because I've met you know what, I'll be honest with you. Have you ever met Nancy Leader? That's what she's the one that
interacted with her years back on Mike Lindemann's.
Well, she's the one that actually made me have a hard time with channeling. Before that, I actually thought it wasn't that bad of a thing, but she did this Zeta Nancy talk with me.
Oh, this stuff was so horrible. It's not even funny.
Girl, I halfway through the show, I had to start laughing. I'm like, and then so I'd get confused. I'm like, well, who am I talking to? Nancy is a Zeta, and I said, why can't I just talk to the damn Zeta? And she got mad at me, but I wasn't trying to be offensive. I was trying to understand, because I'm a researcher, and when you tell me stuff, I want to understand it. So she kind of tainted my view on channel a little bit, but fortunately, I've got some friends like Tuesday Miles who are working the paranormal field that are actually really good and really legitimate researchers.
Yeah.
And
well,
they
I welcome. I've had people come and they've brought various kinds of electronic meters, ghost meters, and
stuff
set them
like
around.
that. Yeah.
And when we're working, we can bury those needles. I mean, and I don't know how it happens. I can't tell you. I can't explain it to you.
Because you're drawn on that energy. That's why.
And we've had so-called poltergeist phenomena happen when we're sitting at the board, and it's always funny because I tell people, they say, well, you're going to have a session of table tilting, and I said, let me tell you what, if that table moves, I'm out of there.
I'm with you on that. Time to leave, buddy. A friend of mine wanted to go. He said, we're going to go. He wanted us to go on a ghost hunt with him. I said, let me tell you what. I said, first, because I live in New Orleans, and there are lots of ghosties down here. I said, if I walk in and the ghost even looks at me, I'm gone. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'm out of here. He said, let me get this right, Jay. He said, you'll go chase aliens down, but you won't talk to God. I said, you're right. I'd rather mess with aliens. I said, I got a rule. Don't mess with dead people, and they won't mess with you.
Yeah, I mean, I had one, ghostly encounter when my grandfather died. One of those.
One of those revisits, yeah.
Yeah, when somebody dies and you hear and experience it.
Yeah.
He was in the hospital and I was at home, and he basically came home and all kinds of poltergeist experience, sounds and effects, but nothing was moved, nothing was changed. That's why I refer to it that way, because it was just auditory. But that's the only one I've ever had, and that's the only one I ever want to have. For me, channeling is done in a brightly lighted room, and there's lots of people around, and there's a lot of conversation that goes on the whole time that it's going on, and if it can't, I mean, come on, if you can't establish contact with a source that is robust enough that it can interact with you as a normal, conscious, fully functioning human being, and the other people around you, what good is it?
That's true. That's a good point. Because if you
gotta sing chants and light candles and do incense and all that nonsense and go into a trance, that's a disabling profession.
Yeah, and see, that's a good point. I mean, if it can't work when there's other people around and it's busy, then you're right. I mean, you might as well just move on to another source because there's just something not working in, or something not right.
I invite you to read it and
well, I'm gonna finish it, and I'll probably get you back on after I finish it. But so far, I mean, I haven't really had any problems with it, and I heard so much flack for poor Richard, and when I first got this, I was like, because I literally, for some reason, ICAR they consider us ufology's policemen. We get, anytime anything goes on in ufology that someone don't like, we get emails. Well, I literally got 300 plus emails over this book. And some of them were taken up for you. Some of them were criticizing Richard for endorsing it. Some were criticizing you. But it was a platitude of different things going on here. So, and when I'm not busy, I actually respond to my email. So I wrote back to all these people, and I said, well, why don't you tell me exactly what the problem was? And why do you have a problem with this? And why do you have a problem with Richard having a problem? Or why do you have a problem with Richard endorsing this? Because I'm curious, And the only word I ever heard was a channeling word. And I said, well, if you're going to just criticize someone for channeling and not go and take everything else at face value, then don't bother me. I mean, you can't just pick. It's easy to pick one thing out of any book and criticize it. That's not hard to do. Anybody can do that. I can find something to criticize in every book I've ever read, regardless how good the book is. But what I was looking for was an overview. I was wanting them to tell me about the whole book. And I actually said this on the air. I said, guys, I said, I got all this email about this one or two specific things. I said, I want to know what you thought about the book entirely. Well, most of the people that wrote back to me really didn't have a problem with the book. So, you know, they were picking on that one thing, and I said, well, why don't y'all contact the lady, ask her how she does it, which I thought she explained in the book, but I still said, why don't you write to the lady, ask her, you know, maybe she can help you understand. And then I said, well, you know what, screw all of this. I talked to my wife and said, why don't you give Richard a call, see if you can get her on the show, and we'll just discuss this on the show, and everybody can listen, and everybody can make up their mind from the way. Now, anyone who's listening to this show knows you are obviously not a nutcase, okay?
I hope not.
Well, I mean, if they're listening to this conversation, it's not that hard of a thing. It's not like you're off saying crazy, outlandish stuff or anything along those lines. So, you know, people need to pay attention sometimes. And I honestly, I got to be honest with you. I think a lot of this attack on Richard is Richard's getting kind of famous now, and I think they were just picking on Richard. I really do. I don't think.
Well, let me say a couple of things about channeling itself. You know, there's a lot of people who consider Pythagoras to have been, you know, father of mathematics, who have done many great intellectual things and philosophical things, and he had the Pythagorean school and so on and so forth. But not a lot of people know that Pythagoras used a channeling device similar to what I do. I mean, I don't go into a trance, I don't channel, I don't even consider myself psychic, you know? But he used a device that was on wheels, like a planchette, and it pointed to letters or figures or whatever and spelled out messages. There's, you know, the most respected so-called channeled material in the history of channeling was delivered by a board-type device, a prosthetic device. I refer to it as a prosthetic. It's like a translation device. There are a lot of people who immediately say, "Oh, well, you know, if you mess with a Ouija board, and it's not even a Ouija board. It's a big circle, and I have a little round plastic thing. It's almost like writing letters on a circle. I just have a special board, and you can buy one. Anybody can buy one.
You're using this so they have a tool to communicate with you with.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is that people get crazy and they say, "Oh, you know, you're going to get possessed if you use the board." Well, let me tell you, if anything interacts with you when you're using a board, it is something that is already there. You just have not been aware of it because it doesn't have a means of speaking. It doesn't have a voice. It's already there. And if you're using a board, all that does is just give a voice to what is already there. And wouldn't you rather know that it's already there and then be able to and have the knowledge to deal with it than to just go along your whole life and have something, you know, hanging around you that you can't get rid of?
That you can't get rid of, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, that's just one thing. And the other thing is that the criticism about the use of Ouija boards, because remember, I mean, they were so popular. I mean, they sold it as a game and Walmart.
They're still popular. They're still popular.
Whatever. And all of a sudden, there was a movie made by Hollywood about a case that was not presented as it really was, because there was some guy on the internet, some magazine, and he did a complete study, you know, fairly recently of this case that the movie The Exorcist was based on, and it was a boy, and there was a whole lot of really interesting things. But it had nothing to do with anybody using a Ouija board and getting possessed by it. But because there was a movieized version of some little girl playing with a Ouija board and suddenly getting possessed and then barfing up pea soup and having her head spin around and throwing priests out the window, you know, the whole paranormal metaphysical world, you know, was reduced to Jello on the floor saying, "Oh my God, don't touch it, you'll get possessed. I've got to burn my Ouija board right now. It's going to attack me as I sleep, for God's sakes." You know, I mean, it's like, it was the most unbelievable thing. I mean, so all of these people who one would think were rational and intelligent were being stampeded away from something that is a really unique tool for psychic and personal, you know, internal investigation because of a movie.
Yeah. Well, the Ouija
is
board
that astonishing?
It is. But see, that's what bothered me about that is because the Ouija board is no different than tarot cards are. And
absolutely not.
If you're going to criticize one, then you have to criticize both. And actually, there's other methods like scurrying and other stuff that we could throw into this loop if we want. But you can't get, and I've said this in the past, because, you know, I'm not a big fan of any of this because Ouija boards scare the crap crap out of me. I'll be honest with you, but and it has nothing to do with any movie, and it has to do with personal experiences as a young man. But the thing about it is you know, there's tarots, there's the Ouija board, there's the ruin stones. There's a lot of different things that you can use to communicate with. But this is what these are. They are communication tools.
They are tools, and you have to learn how to use them. You have to be a trained user.
You do,
and you don't get trained without getting, you know, trained by. And I'm getting ready to make a set of videos to teach people about this. One of the most important things you need, for example, if you're using any kind of channeling method, and to me the least reliable is trans-channeling or mediums. Well, mediumship, you know,
depends on the medium.
I've read about a lot of really great mediums that have really
there's some good ones. There's some crazy ones.
Fantastic stuff. But you know, trans-channeling is and just saying, oh, well, the voice comes into my. Well, you know what? There's a whole bunch of people in the Fundamentalist Baptist Church down the street that the voice of God comes into their head and says, you know, go down and you know, go across the ocean and kill a bunch of Iraqis or whatever, you know, because God told you to. And then presidents even get voices like that in their head. You know, do not rely on voices in your head ever under any circumstances. If you understand dissociation, you need to understand that. But, you know, so anyhow, you've got this whole culture that got turned against this instrument. They are wild-eyed and scared and acting crazy and irrational, and you know, it just boggles the mind. And then all these people come along with these contactee cases, and you read some of the stuff that the contactees come up with, and you read some of the channeled, you know, space alien, you know, the Lord Sananda and Ashtar Command and that kind of, and then Nancy and the Zetas and so forth. And it all just gives the whole, it's more of the noise to signal ratio.
But, you know, I think sometimes that stuff is put there deliberately to keep people that are doing legitimate work from getting too far in the field. Because every now and then I'll notice that someone will get popular that is obviously full of BS, but they will get popular. And
they manage to get their books published, and they become best. I've got a whole bookcase of it. I call it the Mumbo Jumbo Shelf.
And it's true. And all of a sudden, and see, for us, because you know we do the base study, so we have the base things that happen in abductions. Now, of course, there's this other world of I don't want to call it BS because somebody's telling the truth out there, but a lot of it is just that. It's interpretations by the individuals which are wrong. They're not correct. A lot of times you can only interpret things with your own life experiences, and sometimes your life experiences don't equip you for what you're seeing. And some things we simply can't understand because we're just not that evolved yet. And so, of course, we're going to put this into human terms, which are not going to be correct. That's why I tell people all the time, people get mad. They say, well, that contactee's obviously lying. I said, but they're obviously a contactee. I said, so if they've had experiences, but they're lying, what's the problem? And I said, what they're doing is they're in order to make this work in their own lives, they're incorporating this whole big realm and story around it so that it'll fit into whatever it is that they believe in. And of course, that's wrong, but you know, what can you do?
You can't acquire, you can't just, there's a theory that if your mind is pure and you come into direct contact with the object, you know, something out there, that you can have full knowledge, you know, that you can like embrace it or it will merge with you or whatever. There's some kind of metaphysical mumbo jumbo theory, right? Well, the fact is that knowledge is based on a structure, a system, preparation. For example, if somebody who knows nothing about cars or automobiles encounters in a pure state of mind an automobile engine, all they'll see is a pile of metal and pipes and wires.
Yep, that's all we're going to say.
But if you have somebody who is a trained engineer, he has a structure, a framework, and he encounters this automobile engine, he knows exactly what it is, what it does, and how it works.
Yep.
It's the same thing with paranormal phenomena, with channeling phenomena. You have to have a structure. You have to have a framework. You have to have theories that, you know, on which to base your knowledge. And you also have to be open enough to say that all of this could change. I can throw all of this out the window with that additional piece of data that changes everything.
And it could be anything. I tell people all the time, don't get your mind set. Don't become too dogmatic in your views. I said, because I've been in this field 25 years, and I can tell you myself at least a dozen times I have changed my mind based on new ideas or new evidence that's come into play.
Yeah. And I get accused of, you know, because sometimes, you know, I change my mind. I write something, and it's based on everything I know at the moment.
Yeah,
And then 6 months later, I've learned something else, and I'll write something, and I'll say, well, formerly, this is what I thought, and now, I learned this, and so this, and then I get accused of changing my story.
So you changed your mind, and I've said that. I've been accused of that. And somebody told me one time, well, I heard you 5 years ago say this, and now you're saying this. I said, because 5 years ago I didn't have all the pieces of that puzzle. I said, now I do.
The only people on this planet who are absolutely certain are psychopaths.
Yeah, you're not kidding about that one either. But hold that thought for a minute, because we're gonna have to take a quick break here, so we can let our break time get into the rerun queue. Guys, we're going to be back in about 10 minutes. I want everyone to please stay tuned to UFO Undercover. I'm your host, Joe Montaldo. I'm sitting and speaking with Laura Knight.
Jadczyk.
Yeah. And I just had that name perfect, too. Jadczyk. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying not to mess her name up because I want y'all to remember who she was. But we'll be back in a few minutes. So everyone, please stay tuned and listen to the music. Let's see.
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone, to UFO Undercover. Like Natasha says, I'm your host, Joe Montaldo. I'm sitting and speaking with Laura Knight-JadczykThe this evening about her book, High Strangeness. And actually, the conversation's been very well, so I hope everybody's enjoying the show. For anyone who's tuning in later, catching this show will re-air on Wednesday at its regular scheduled time. This is actually a pre-record that we're letting the audience get a little taste of what's going on. Sorry, guys. As usual, the breaks are where the good stuff happens, but y'all can't hear those because, Laura, I tell them all the time, it's a shame we don't record the breaks because some of the conversations at the breaks are better than the actual program. But like I said, it's usually stuff that can't be put on the air.
Yeah.
It's stuff that we're discussing either in research or stuff that's just not ready for prime time, as I like to say. But, we've been talking about a lot of stuff today, and it's really funny to me how people get caught in particular ruts, or they break out of particular ruts, like religion itself. They just get stuck, and they can't see beyond that. And, I like I said, I have no problem with worshiping or being spiritual or anything along those lines. It's just I don't see where religion is actually serving a purpose in mainstream society anymore other than causing problems. I mean, let's be honest, we can say whatever we want to say about the Middle East and the United States, but basically what's going on over there, this is two different idiocies here. I mean, we've got the Muslim world and the Christian world, and they hate each other. And I don't see this changing anytime soon. And I hate to say, but there was a study done about 50 years ago. 75% of all the major wars on this planet happened over religion. The other 25% happened either over land or women. I was kind of like, huh? The women one threw me for a loop, and then someone reminded me about
Helen of Troy.
Yeah, and Helen. Then there was something about one of the queens of England as well, and I was like, well, yeah, I guess that is true. And but it's strange. It's strange in itself. But what can we do?
Well, I think the need for I think that many people have a need to make contact with the transcendent. I think that's the urge for religious experience, and that is taken and twisted by man-created religions and twisted and used and thwarted for personal agendas or purposes. Like they use people's urge for this transcendent experience to get them involved in a religion, and then they begin to gradually degrade the religion, and then they use the adherents of the religion to, in the name of this God, in order to have this transcendent experience, you must go kill these people over there because they are threatening your transcendence, is what I think happens. But this need that people have is very real, and I think we should honor it in a certain sense because there's a lot of power in people getting together and having some kind of a a ritual communion, so to speak. And it doesn't have to be just enacting certain things in a mindless sort of way. I mean, an example is there are groups of women who get together now who talk about their abuse experiences, and this might even work for people who've had abduction experiences, and they get together and they build a bonfire and they talk about their experiences, each one of them, and each of the others acknowledges that person's experience. They may write something down about the experience on a piece of paper or on have some object, and they go around a circle, and then at a certain point, then they will take that paper and they'll put it in the fire and they'll burn it, and maybe they'll sing before, sing afterwards, to get themselves harmonized together, to sort of connect their chakras together. And it can be a very moving and transcendent experience, and they can have a lot of relief, and it enables them to go on with their lives, people who've had very painful and troubling experiences. So when you have people who have who have a difficult time dealing with life on a day-to-day basis, because let's face it, reality sucks. I mean, when you face reality, and this is one of the little things we just mentioned on the break. Reality is depressing. You get depressed. I mean, there's just no question about it, and you have to have some way of making contact with that part of yourself that inducts creative energy into your being, so that you can continue to go on and deal with this reality that's being run by psychopaths, to your detriment. That's how I feel about religion. I think the spiritual, mutually agreed ceremonial. Let me get rid of the word ritual. Ceremony for groups is very, very powerful. And I think that
it does.
if we could find rational ways to deal, and not a set of actions that somebody else prescribes for you. Find out what works for you, for your group. Create your own ceremony, and every situation, could have its own ceremony. You make it up as you go along. It has to be meaningful in a dynamic and interactive way with the universe in which you live.
Well, no, it's a good point, and it's like when I was young and would see the suggestion or the power of prayer, for lack of a better way of saying it. But I've seen sick people get healed. I've seen other things happen, and so I know group consciousnesses can affect our everyday reality, and they can affect our own everyday reality. And I know the need to believe is strong in humans.
I don't know if we necessarily need to believe something.
Well, we need to know something. We need to know that there's something higher than ourselves, is what it comes down to. I'm not sure why we need to know that there's something higher than ourselves, but we do. I mean, literally, we need to know that there is more to the universe than just us and what's going on this planet. And it's a fundamental, basic need for all humans. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from or where you are or what you're doing. It's something that we all need. It's just a need that we have to have and we have to fill. I'm not sure where it comes from. It's almost like, Laura, it's almost like there's a void we're trying to fill.
Well, I think what it is partly is that, number one, we need to feel this connectedness to other human beings.
Yeah.
We're doing something together. That's the first thing. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, I think that there is some part of us that extends into a higher reality. And so that part of us that is in that higher reality also connects with parts of the other people that are in the higher reality, and it helps us to induct energy into ourselves from the creative side of the universe. There's something very mystical and mysterious and real and powerful, and I'm not suggesting that anybody should create voodoo dolls of George Bush or Dick Cheney and start throwing them on fires or anything. But
don't give them no
however,
idea.
if you feel so inclined, let me know the exact time you're going to be doing it.
Oh Lord, don't be giving the crazies ideas now.
I'm just joking, people.
You know how they are. They'll be writing you, sending you voodoo dolls.
There is something very powerful about connecting your minds together by looking in the same direction, having the same aim, and that's one of the reasons why I think that the world is the way it is. Why they have created so much division among human beings. You've got racial strife and tension. You've got men against women. You've got ethnic tension. You've got this country against that country. the New Agers against the Catholics, against
Oh,
the
yeah.
Protestants, against the Scientologists, against the Mormons. All of these different groups and everything are incepted and created, I think, by pathological people and designed to just put people at each other's throats. And human beings really need to get together right now because we have a problem on this planet and we really need to solve it.
Well, it's one of the few times that in our society that we have the ability. I mean, we have the internet now, so we can all link up.
We could do it.
Yeah, there's no excuse not to get together anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody's ideas, thoughts, and designs can be put forward and expressed. And geez, and just look at the blogs all over the internet now. Everybody's got a voice. So I mean, we need to come to some kind of coherent understanding.
We need to come together, and the thing is when we come together, let's agree on some standards for what we're going to consider to be evidence of this or that, and also let's exclude the pathological people from our communion because they're the ones that come in and start whispering and spreading rumors and lies and creating discord and taking down the tone of any kind of higher aspiration. We need to exclude them and get together with real human beings who have real empathy, real compassion for one another, and agree that there are many different ways to the top of the same mountain. You can go up many different paths, but we're all going to the same the same mountaintop. We need to get together.
It's true, but it's what happens. I think is mainly it's ego that gets in the way.
Pathology.
It's I'll give you an example. About 7 years ago, a friend of mine came to me and said, Joe, why can't we get ufologists to agree to a set of guidelines for abduction research?
Yeah.
I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, I'm fairly well connected, and I know quite a few of them. I said, I'll come. Oh, God. This turned in, and still, we're 7 years later and still haven't done this. And this turned into a nightmare like you wouldn't believe because, when we contacted like Jacobs and Hopkins, they went off in two totally different tangents with it, which I was surprised because usually they're kind of close together. Oh, no, Whitley went off on his. And by the time it was all said and done, we ended up having like 21 different, but no one was even getting close. And so
nobody was agreeing.
No, nobody would agree. So I said, I'll tell y'all what, I'll even make it easier on y'all. I'll give y'all some guidelines. Oh, no, they didn't even want to do that. And what it came down to was ego. There was 5 or 6 egos that just would not bend to the other one. They were the only possible plausible explanation. And I'm like, no, guys. It's like David. David's done some good basic research in alien abduction. He has not gone to the next level. He's still where he was 15, 18 years ago, which is fine. I understand that. But he hasn't moved to the next level, which a lot of the other researchers have, based on his research, by the way.
Yeah.
But, he's not willing to take that next step. Buzz Hopkins' health isn't as good as it used to be, and I think he's been kind of, even getting out of this. And Whitley has a totally different view on this. And so you're not getting any real coherence. The only place I've seen in anything where we agree is what I was talking about earlier was myself, Darrell Sims, Jovan Smith, Mary Rodwell, Katarina Wilson, Leah Haley, Miriam Delicato, Miss Isley, Jim Sparks, and a few of the others that are doing this kind of basic research. We do agree on about 80% of the abduction stuff, but still, even with that, we can't come up with a coherent guideline because there are just fundamental things we will not agree on. And I hate to say it, but it's more about ego than it is anything else. Who's right and who's wrong? Instead of just taking it and saying, okay, we need this, we need this, we need this, people's egos getting hurt. And then I found that there's a lot of control issues. Certain people want to be in control.
Well, all of the things you're talking about, egos that continue to the point where damage is being done to other people or to the system itself, that's pathological. When
it is.
When you're talking about people who, they can't let go of their emotional attachment to things, that's pathology. It's a kind of sickness, And people, all kinds of people with those pathologies are involved in any kind of study or research because, people with pathology naturally gravitate to positions of power.
Well, I tell people all the time, I have a big ego. You can't be in this field and not have an ego. It's impossible because you'll get squashed. squashed.
There's
But
a healthy ego, though.
But I tell them I will never let my ego get in the way of my research or my own personal life.
Exactly.
I'll be like, well, nope, you know.
You can't survive without an ego, and we're not talking about that kind of. We're talking about an entrenched inability to see another person's point of view, or to see a basic central point of view where everyone can agree on something.
And that's half of ufology. I hate to say it, but it's half of ufology.
That's why I don't have anything to do with it.
But you know, and I've said this before, there is a new breed of ufologists in the works. It's people like myself, Richard Dolan, Karen Dolan, a few of the others that we're doing research with. They're the new breed of ufologists. They're not the old breed where, and I'm not going to mention any names because I have to work with them, but a lot of them are set in their ways. Their answers are the only right answers, and they won't change their views on anything.
And meanwhile, the world burns.
Yeah, and some of them have been preaching the same thing for 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, but when you've got groups like ours and other people with more data and more research and more understanding, you should incorporate that into your research. But no, because then it changes what they know is right or what they believe is right. It changes it, and of course, that creates problems for them.
Well, the problem is that they're not working with a genuine theory of knowledge. A genuine theory of knowledge would postulate that even the point of view of the person doing the research or your theory itself must submit itself to examination and analysis.
It has to. You know, I tell people all the time, that's why, I do a lot of public speaking and I do a lot of the radio. So one reason I formed the radio network is so that our organization and our fellow friends in ufology had a venue to speak. Because we want to know what other people think. And, every now and then I'll find out I'll do a lecture like on the Greys or the reptilians or the humans or something like that. Matter of fact, there's a 10-hour series I've just done on audio on these 3 alien races and military abductions.
Wow.
And so
I'd
people,
like to hear that.
Yeah, it's good and it's a lot of fun. And people go listen to it and they're like, they'll either write to me, oh, you got to write out our money, or they'll criticize, which I actually handle criticism real well. I don't get mad when people criticize. If it's something I firmly believe, no, I'm not going to change my mind. But if you can present an argument and data, I will, and
exactly.
I have in the past.
Give
I'm
me
not
a specific argument. Give me some data.
I tell them I tell them don't call and say, well, Joe, you're wrong, or Joe, you're a moron, or Joe, you're this, you're that. No, then I'm just going to ignore you. But if you write to me or you call me on the phone, because I'm probably easily accessible, and you say, Joe, I listen to you say this, but I've seen this, this, and this, and for this reason and that reason, I may change my mind, and I have. I used to, when I first got involved with this, the aliens were all one way, and now I know that no, they have different ideas, different thoughts, different signs, different layers, and different groups. Like people talk about the Greys, the reptilians, and the humans all working and coexisting with each other. Well, the little 3-foot Greys mess with everybody, but people don't realize that there's 7-foot Greys, and there's whites and browns that are also in the same family, and they're much more advanced than either the humans or the reptilians. They're more like the peacekeepers. And the Greys actually work for them. The little Greys actually work for them, but they also have dealings in working with both the reptilians and the humans as well. And I think that's why people get confused sometimes, but most people are not aware that the Greys have 4 or 5 different sizes and 3 or 4 different colors and about 11 different varieties. And, the average researcher is just not going to know that because they really either haven't experienced it themselves or have not seen the data to back it up. Mm-hmm. So that changes a lot of stuff for a lot of the researchers when they find this out, or they interview a lot of the contactees that we have. So it changes a lot. And it puts different spins on different things. So it gets confusing. And, because I was always under the impression, first off, that the very short Greys originally I thought they were from the future coming back. Then I realized, no, that's not what it was. Then a lot of them said they were automatons or androids or what have you. Well, we did find that there is one version of them that seems to be part alien, part robot, and then there's another 3-foot Grey that's just a Grey, and so you have both of those, and they seem to have ties with all what's going on this planet. And then you have the tall ones that are either related to them or they deal with, and this is all information that it's hard to get. There's not a lot of people talking about it.
Well, then you're going to enjoy reading this book because this Cassiopean transmission talked about all these different varieties and types and so forth, long before there was any information available such as you're describing.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing, and I'm sure that you're going to catch criticized because you're talking about more than one alien, because some of these contactees get they get really mad when you talk about more than a little 3-foot gray. I'm thinking, well, baby, you're in the wrong realm. That's just one little alien that works for somebody. I'm like, I don't think you're missing the whole thing if that's all you think that's going on here.
Yeah.
And but you're going to catch
criticism. It's a zoo out there.
Yeah, there is. There literally is. Like I tell people all the time, we only deal with 5 basic types because we try to keep as much data orientated as we can. But I express this all the time. There are probably more than that visiting the planet. There's also what I like to call is dimensional bleed through and things like this, where dimensions are fading across, and there's contact in these realms. I'll give you an example. Boy, talk about making paranormal people insane with this. A couple of years ago, I introduced new theories about ghosts. Well, actually, about a decade ago. I said I thought ghosts were dimensional bleed through. I did not think they were dead people. And, of course, this just went insane. I'm like, well, guys, think about it. I said, you've ever had a dead person talk to you, or have you ever had a family visitation after a death? And a lot of people, of course, have. I said, have you ever noticed that there's always something slightly off cue or something slightly wrong with the visitation? Like, you know the individual, and these are usually visual, not audio, or audio and visual, but they're usually visual involved. I said, but you'll notice that sometimes a person's slightly different, or they may say something that slightly doesn't fit. I said, dimensional bleed-through will allow your father in another dimension to talk to you directly. I said, the problem is in that dimension, they're still alive. They're not deceased.
That's a good idea. I like that.
And I said, of course, we're going to take it as they're dead because, of course, we've lost a parent or a loved one. And what got me on this is when right after my father died when I was 16, I had a visitation, but he was talking to me, and it was my dad, but he was saying things that just were not quite in frame with the life that I had with him. And I thought maybe it was some kind of disinformation or some kind of mess between the two realms. And then I realized that's not what it was.
It was a different branch of reality.
Yeah, once I realized that there was multiple dimensions, I realized, well, if there's multiple dimensions, a lot of what we consider ghosts are just bleed through from other dimensions.
There's another really good theory, and I don't remember if it's in High Strangeness or if it's in something else I've written, but it's one that was put forward by Tom Lethbridge. And he was a really interesting guy in England. He's dead now. But he noticed that there were a lot of hauntings in England that occurred in places where there was underground water. And what he noticed about these situations was that they were like recordings, and they would only play when the atmosphere was just damp. And then, for example, like they would see a Roman soldier marching along. Only the Roman soldier, you'd see him only from his knees up, because the original Roman road that he was marching on was, a couple feet down in the ground. It had been buried by, the buildup of dirt and so forth,
over the years,
however long it's been, and that they, didn't seem to interact in any way with the current reality. They didn't notice anything or anybody. They would just be, marching along, and it would play over and over again. And then there were other situations where a ghost would appear at a particular time under particular circumstances, like if the moon is full and there's a ring around the moon or whatever, you'll see the white lady or whatever, or the headless horseman. And that these kinds of things, he thought, reflected the fact that under particular atmospheric conditions, there were fields like magnetic tape in the stone and in the water, in the fields.
Yeah, we've talked about that where
water.
Yeah, some things.
And it would just run like a tape.
Yeah. We've actually discussed it, and we do think that's the two theories we've used, the dimensional bleed-through and the one you're talking about, because we really do think those two theories explain almost 99.9% of the ghost encounters. Not 100%.
I have to agree, yeah. I like
it. Because, there are places like there was a cave that some guys, and they just did an investigation, and come to find out the rocks were very magnetic in the cave. And he said, when he seen this, it was like a replay. He said you would see it. It did not interact with them. It did not see them. It did not bother them. And then a couple hours later, it would start over again. And it was the same thing. And
exactly.
And I do agree with that. I think that's a very plausible explanation. And like I said, what we're talking about, those two theories explain about it. But the ghost hunters don't want to hear that.
Oh, no.
Because then it puts them out of business.
They want dead dudes.
Yeah,
they want to catch one.
Yeah, I tell them all the time, you're not a true, if you're not looking at these two theories, then you're not a real researcher. You're somebody who wants to sensationalize this and make some money off of it. I say, because any real researcher is going to look at both these theories and say, well, damn, they cover a lot of what we consider to be ghosts. And like I said, it's 99.9%, but there still is that 0.1% out there that is not explained by either theory. And those still need legitimate investigation. But
Yep.
unfortunately, I got to say, the majority of ghost hunters that I meet are lacking at best.
Oh, they're pathetic.
There's a couple of them out there that do decent work, but in general, most of them are just fame hogs or
Yeah, these so-called paranormal
yeah,
experts.
looking for a
Ghostbusters.
paycheck or a lot of them. I hate to say this, it's about stroking their egos. It's you know, they want to be patted on the head. They want fame and fortune or just fame. You know, a lot of people are happy with just fame, but
And some of them start out with some good ideas and
Some of
honest
them do.
intentions, and then somewhere along the way they just get,
they get lost. They get
yeah.
lost there. See, that's another thing I'm real lucky with. I can't really get a big swole head because I have a big support group around me, and they will pop the bubble.
Oh,
like
me
that.
too. Absolutely.
They're like, Joe, have you lost your mind? What are you talking about, Joe? Are you getting off on a rampage? Just shut up and sit down and pay attention to what you say.
yeah, I've got
And
a
they're all
research
very,
group and a
you know,
big family, and
that's
you
what
know.
we have. We have a big family and a big group that we work with, and most of them have known me for years and years, and they're not afraid to say, Joe. Well, it's like when I introduced the new theory on Betty and Barney Hill. Most of them, like, they had a heart attack. And because I said Betty and Barney Hill were milans, they were military abducted in the United States. They were actually physically abducted in Canada by aliens, re-abducted in the United States, and it's based on the tapes because everything that Betty and Barney talk about are talking about terrestrial-based technologies. You know, nail samples, hair samples, skin samples, urine samples, needles. They describe the room as like an operating room with operating materials. This is terrestrial. This is typical 1940s, 1950s, 1960s contamination research. Like if you had been exposed to something and they were trying to find out what it was. It's typical. And of course, because I changed this, people are coming unglued all over the place, but you know, most ufology is accepting it now as the correct explanation for what happened. And I just don't understand why I was the one that had to correct it. I still don't understand that today. I mean,
well, I'm glad somebody's doing what you're doing because it certainly needed to be done.
it does.
And it wasn't being done when I was reading cases and frantically trying to, you know, get answers.
Yeah, because
we
didn't start coming public. Probably we formed the organization in '99, but really and truly we didn't start getting real public 2003, 2004. You know, so it was a little bit later than after what y'all were doing, and even then there was a lot of resistance to what we were doing, and of course we went through. You know, and then all of a sudden we became the largest UFO abduction organization on the planet, and of course that made trouble. Like I was talking with Alejandro Rohan last night. As a matter of fact, we had on that support group or in the virtual auditorium. We have a virtual auditorium where we broadcast from. Last night in there, I was in there. Karen Dolan was in there. Alejandro Rohan from MUFON was in there. Grant Cameron was in there, and a couple of other researchers were in there. We were just chit-chatting about a lot of the stuff we're talking about now. And anybody who happened to have been lucky in being there got a very special treat because you don't see that many ufologists in the same place talking about the same stuff and agreeing on it. But you know, it was hard for us when we first started, and it was hard, you know, when we had to fight with MUFON about no, you're not the largest organization, and you don't have the best researchers, and you know, we're 5 times your size. And we have way
MUFON
more.
is a black hole.
It is.
Collect cases and they disappear.
Well, that's Alejandro asked me last night why I formed Icon. That's what I told him. I said it was the black hole of Calcutta. I said I would send in 3 months worth of data, and 2 years later I'm still waiting for a reply. I said enough was enough. I said I couldn't do that anymore. I said my directors will submit something to me, and if they don't hear from me back in a week, I get a phone call. Hey Joe, did you read that case essentially? What did you think about it? And we'll discuss it right then and there. And that's the way it should be handled. Yeah. But you got to do what you got to do. What else? I was going to ask you something else, and my whole brain just went. Now being in France and all, and in Europe and all, have you noticed over there that the book is being received better than it is in the United States? I'm curious because.
Oh yeah, my books sell really well in Europe.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that because when I talk to a lot of my European friends that are ufologists like Nick Pogue and a few of the others, they tell me that it's easier to deal with the subject over there than it is over here. Of course, that bothers me because I consider the Brits to be more uptight than the Americans. Yeah. But yet they still accept this subject.
Well, I've got it out in French and Spanish, and it's being translated into German.
Oh,
and the French and Spanish versions are doing really well. I mean, it's.
Well, it sounds like it's going to do okay, and I don't think, and like I said, I'm glad having you on today because this little interview today, and I'll get Linda to bring you on in the future again, but this interview today is going to dispel a lot of the BS flying around the internet and through ufology now. So it should
well,
make Richard's
I don't know
life.
if it'll dispel anything
well,
because people will believe what they want to believe.
yeah, well, I'm hard to get away from, and my network.
Richard came over and checked me out himself.
Yeah,
and that's
see,
why
that was
he
the
wrote
thing,
what he wrote, and he wrote it because he knows. We talked. We spent a lot of time talking and interacting together.
Well, see, now he can say, well, you know what? Because everybody considers me very skeptical to start off with, and sometimes even rude. He can say, well, you know, Joe Montaldo interviewed her. It's posted to the internet. Why don't you go listen for yourself and formulate your own opinion? And that will help. It's not going to give her to everybody by any means, Laura, but it will help a lot of the dissension that's been going on now. Because in the interview, you sound really bright. You're doing a real good job of articulating yourself. You don't sound like some of the like Billy Myers and Nancy Leader and them, which is what I think people were expecting you to sound like. And so right off the bat, that's going to make Richard's life that much easier, and he'll get that much less BS over it. And still, I don't know why they're picking on him about it anyway. If they got a problem, they should write you.
Yeah, and well, I think it's a concerted effort.
I think there's a group of people out there right now that just want to pick on Richard.
Yeah, well, the thing is, what he's doing is a really fantastic piece of work of exposing, just how much is really going on. And if they can use, me and my so-called weird ideas to smear him, that's something they're going to try to do. And people shouldn't really let them do that to Richard.
No, I don't think they should.
If I could take it back and say, Richard, you shouldn't have written this nice review for my book. We shouldn't have published it in the book. Whatever. But how are we going to know that just by telling the simple, honest truth as we see it,
that all this was
used to try to hurt us?
And but that's typical. That is just typical in today's ufology community.
So I'm hoping all the people of goodwill who care about Richard, just if you care about Richard, you don't have to care about me.
Yeah. I got to be honest with you. I think this was brought about by some of the old timers. I think there's some jealousy issues going on here. Because with the exception of maybe two other speakers, Richard's probably one of the more prominent speakers in the field right now. And I'm thinking that some of the laymen and some of the older ones are a little jealous of it. And it's causing him a little problem. But
well, he came in here and he brought some methods.
Yep. And
he brought scientific methods to the whole issue. And he's dealing with data, with facts, not belief, not leaping off into, there's aliens on Mars. I mean, that's a hypothesis.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, it's a good point, too, because that's exactly what it is. It's just a hypothesis. There's no real proof to it or anything.
There's all kinds of things that are possible. There's some things that are plausible. There are a few things that are hypothetical.
Yep.
But we still need to deal with data, hard data. And that's what Richard does, and he does it better than anybody else does it. And just because a lot of his data, backs up some of the material or even a lot of the material in my so-called channeling experiment, doesn't mean that my experiment should reflect on his data collection. His data is pure. It's clean.
Yeah, I'm going to put a think tank together for us so we can do away with that channeling word. We'll find some other words. Well, no, because really and truly, it's the word. It's not what you were doing, because when we talk about use of tools, that's quite acceptable in both ufology and paranormal. It's just the word. People, they hear it. And it's because of a select few people out there. It has nothing to do with the overall groups that are out there. It's just 3 or 4 people who use the word channeling. That, of course, makes everybody else. And so you're not doing what like the other channelers. You're not like what like Nancy and them do. It's not the same thing. So really, we do need to come up with a new term for it, and I think that would eliminate some of the BS. But still, people need to learn to look beyond certain
How about
things.
prosthetic communication?
That might work. We got to come up with something because, oh man, it's insanity out there these days, and you got to wonder about half these people and why. And I still, like I said, I did not see why they had this personal attack against him. I do think a couple of people in ufology are behind it. I really do. I don't think this has anything to do with you per se. I really think that there's some people that just want to.
Do you think it's just people in ufology, or do you think it may be officials in high places?
I think it's both. Because I learned a long time ago some key people in ufology, especially in MUFON, but in some other parts of ufology, are directly linked to government.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think they're plants, and I think some of them are plants knowingly, and I think some of them are plants not knowingly.
Unknowingly.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same. The whole metaphysical field is full of that. The whole paranormal field, the alternative news. It's just amazing. Like it's signal to noise, and that's something that what's his name, John McDonald talked about, was the signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
And there's so much noise that it really takes a lot of patience and time and care, and getting your hands dirty in the data itself to be able to pick out the signal from the noise.
Yeah, they just don't want us to know. You know, they don't. They want to keep as much of this to themselves as they can, and mostly because of power and stuff like that. You know, I'm sure there's some financial involved, especially with some of this, but I think this is more about let's just keep as much a secret as we can and keep as much control as we can, because if too much of it gets out, they lose control.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they definitely don't want people like us out there talking about it, because then, you know, then it's going to change people's opinions and minds. And so I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who's in politics, he said, you know, Joe, y'all are a threat to politicians because y'all give alternative ideas and designs and alternative lifestyles other than what the government wants us to do. I said, well, if I checked, we live in a free country. We can do whatever the hell we want. And I said, I know they're trying to take those rights away. I said, but as of now, it's still a free country, and we should be able to live and do what we want to. And I said, you just sound like every other politician that just want to keep control and make us all just do what you want us to do. I said, but that's not what we're here for.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there's one thing that I would like to get in here, just a little blurb for a friend of mine who promotes this idea that there are 4 things that can really help all of us, you know, right now, starting right now, and that's to eat fresh food, whole food, don't eat anything packaged or prepared, turn off your television, bank locally in a credit union, and get out of debt.
Yeah, well, I'm not in debt. I have my own garden in my backyard, and I probably can honestly say if I watch an hour of TV a year, I'm doing good.
We can take back our world if we want to.
Yeah, well, I use the internet a lot, but that's because I got a lot of research going on, so I use it for that.
Well, internet's not TV.
But I'm not a big TV fan. I do like to grow my own fruits and vegetables because they taste better, and of course, it's better for you all the way around. And even a lot of times when I'm buying beef and stuff like that, I'll buy wholesale right out of the slaughterhouse, and it's better for you. It's healthier for you. It's better for you, and all the way around. And we tell people that all the time, but people want to live their own life. But I know we're getting ready to run out of time here, so any plugs, plug the book, websites, friends, any of that?
Well, I just want to tell all of the critics, just read the book, please. And then if you have a question, you know, write to me and ask me. You know, I'll try to answer your question. I have been writing, you know, almost day and night for years now, answering people's questions. I try to answer every question. If you don't want to believe that I'm sincere, you know, you can ask other people about me, people who know me. Don't listen to somebody who doesn't know me.
Yep.
You know?
That's what I'm saying. Website where they can find you? Any particular one you use?
Oh yeah, you can. If you wanna come to our news website, that's www.sott.net. That's SOTNet. Or if you want to come to my Cassiopeia website, you can come to www.Cassiopeia, and that's spelled CASSIOPAEA.org. And we have a forum. If you want to talk to me, you come and join my forum and you talk to me, because I will talk to you right there in public. I will answer your questions. You come and talk to me right there. I'm there. I read the forum every day.
Yep. So we do the same thing. That's why we have these groups so we can do that. Where can they find the book? Everywhere, anywhere?
You can get the book on Amazon. You can also go to Red Pill Press, and that's www.redpillpress.com. And you can also get it from QFG Publishing, and that's QFGpublishing.net, I believe, or net.org or com, probably com.
I know it was pretty searchable when I typed in your name and the book.
Yeah, you can find it in any number of places just by typing in high strangeness and Yadczyk, JADCZYK.
Oh, I seen something. Husband's name? I thought
How
I
do you-
seen
yeah.
him write. Did he write something? I seen something part 1 and 2, but I didn't get a chance to
Oh,
read it.
he wrote what used to be a preface or an introduction, but it's now been moved to an afterword. He has some philosophical and what would you call it, scientific comments to make on the channeling process itself.
Oh, cool.
Our channeling process, not,
Not every. Yeah, I understand.
I mean, we're not talking about, what, somebody going into trance and thinking, Lord Sananda or Jesus Christ is talking to them.
Yeah, Lord Banana Brain. I've heard some stories.
Yeah.
And then sometimes somebody will come to me and I'll be involved, and I'm thinking, Joe, don't laugh, Joe. Come on, they might be serious. Don't laugh. And then they'll say something, and I just lose it. And of course, they get mad at me, and I'm like, well, guys, I'm sorry. It sounds dumb. I gotta laugh. And,
so it's
not the best way to do research, but sometimes.
It's probably one of the few books in the world that includes a lot of scientific speculation, some inspirational material, shall we call it, prosthetically received, and, a word from a blurb from a real historian who is a data-oriented researcher and a mathematician, physicist who is a specialist in hyperdimensional physics. I mean, you can't get many books with that kind of a combination.
No, you can't. Really, you can't. That's the thing.
So read it and share it with your friends. And if you get scared by anything it says, come and talk to me. I mean, it's not the end of the world just because we've got, weird critters flying around out there doing strange things and kidnapping and raping people. I mean, we're not completely. Come on. Would they be going to so much trouble to conceal their activities if they weren't afraid of something that we have if we could figure it out, like, getting together and getting over our differences?
Well, and this has been brought to my attention by contactees and even some of the alien research we've done. If we could get ourselves together and actually concentrate, we could probably slow down and stop a lot of stuff. But I don't know. We're still the ego problem gets in the way. But
you got the ego problem.
Yep.
People got to get over their ego.
They do. They need to learn that they can listen and interact and not have to be in control at every minute. But Laura, I want to tell you thank you for being on. I enjoyed the interview today. For everyone listening tonight, or will be listening to this in the near future, this archive will stay up. It'll go up Wednesday. It'll be played in its regular time on Wednesday, and the archive will stay up for another week after that. So if you want to find Laura's book, you should be able to click it right there. I'm pretty sure it's posted to the site, and it'll take you right to where you need to go. And I know the book's up there and her website's up there. So that'll make it easy to find without any real problems, guys. Y'all can hyperlink right over there. One of the great things about the internet. And, it takes you wherever you want to click, whoop, and you're there in 2 seconds. I love the internet. Again, Laura, I want to thank you for being on. Laura Knight-JadczykThe.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for being on. Anybody who's had any problems with this or with Richard, you can write to both of them, and I'm sure they'll clarify for this without any real problems at all. Until next week, guys, have some fun, smile, enjoy your lives. I'll see y'all Wednesday.
Prepare yourself for an evening filled with paranormal, special guests, interviews, haunting stories, creatures of the unknown, and tales that will chill you to the bone. Brought to you by the UPRN Network and Pittsburgh Paranormal Society. Take a walk into the night with Sean Kelly.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Sean Kelly.